I needed a new shed as my old one needed replacing. I also wanted a space where I could practice my bass guitar playing without the neighbours complaining. I started to investigate to see what other garden offices looked like. I got a quote for a garden office and it was £15,000. This was way out of my budget, so I decided to build one myself. I checked on the government website and my local council website to see if I needed to get planning permission. As long as I kept this within permitted development, all was okay. I investigated online how to build an outbuilding and what items I needed. I also checked with builders and carpenters and asked them questions too. They were more than happy to share their knowledge. I managed to get hold of some basic plans from a friend who had a garden office built. I put a budget together. I listed all the items I needed. As the items were new items, the budget came in at £9,500. I then looked at second-hand items and gathered prices from eBay. This came in much cheaper at £5,500. I knew I wanted maple cladding on the front. I originally looked at bifold doors too as part of my plan, but these were really expensive even for second-hand doors. I saw doors I really liked on eBay that were more traditional looking. This then set the design of my new outdoor room. I contacted several companies to see if they were able to donate any items, as I wanted to do the build using recycled materials. I managed to get items from a loft company we had previously used for our loft conversion. I also went to a recycled timber yard in Peckham to get timber for framing. The plans I drew incorporated the double doors. The doors were quite high and I needed to keep the whole build to under 2.5 metres high to keep this within permitted development. To make sure there was not a high step up and the building was not higher than 2.5 metres high, I had to dig down 12 inches. I started by digging out for the base. I didn't hire a skip. I must have made about 30 trips to the local tip. They then started to charge to dispose of hardcore and soil. I had to be careful to make sure I didn't dig down too far, as the damp-proof membrane needs to be higher than the ground level. Once the ground was level, I was ready for the concrete blocks. The reason I used concrete blocks instead of a concrete base was just due to the price. To lay a 5 metre by 5 metre concrete base would have cost about £1,500. I spent £20 on the base including sharp sand. I dug out a further 2 to 3 inches for the concrete blocks to sit in. I put 1 to 2 inches of sharp sand in the hole and then put the blocks on top of this. I levelled the blocks and compacted them with a rubber mallet. The 3 by 6 inch sleepers also helped to further compact the sharp sand. I used reinforced concrete blocks in the middle. I put down black weed control fabric on top of the ground to stop any weeds from growing through. I then put the 3 by 6 inch sleepers in place and bolted these together with timber bolts. I treated the wood with wood stain even though the timber was tantalised. I made sure the sleepers were all level and flat. Next came the damp-proof membrane. This is essentially a large plastic sheet. This keeps the damp from rising up into the building. It rained after I installed this, but once the rest of the building started to take shape, this dried out. Next I installed the 4 by 2 inch timber floor. You can see some of the pieces of wood are painted, as this was the second-hand timber I got from the recycling yard. Once a subframe was together, I cut the insulation into the frame. I made sure it fitted firmly so it didn't fall out. I then put the second-hand OSB board in place and nailed this down. I got the boards from another reclaim yard. This time it was near Wembley in London. I then covered them to avoid it all getting wet overnight. Next I put the walls together. I built the framing around the windows. I made sure there was about a 2mm gap to allow for any movement in the timber. I took them out again as they were quite heavy and I wouldn't have been able to lift the walls and level this with the heavy windows in. I built the whole of the back wall and then lifted it in place. This was due to the limited access behind the building, but I made sure the building was about 50 to 70 centimetres from the boundary for access for any future maintenance such as restaining the cladding. I then built the sides and the front wall framing. I used a spirit level to get the sides vertical. I secured them temporarily with a diagonal beam. I then put the roof beams in place. I tried to bolt 2 beams together so I could use the recycled wood I had left, but these were not strong enough and sagged. So I had to buy 9 new beams that were 6 metres long. I then cut them into size. This cost me £180 for 9 of them. I laid plywood across the roof joists and nailed these in place. I screwed from the underneath a 4x2 edging to secure the insulation boards that I will be using. I put a vapour barrier on top of the roof plywood, then laid the insulation boards on top of the vapour barrier. I then put OSB boards on top to allow me to walk on this in future for any maintenance work needed. Then glued a 1-piece rubber roof in place, then fixed guttering to the back. The roof has a slope on it from the front to the back to allow any rainwater to run off. I nailed second-hand OSB boards to the stud-work walls. Then I put a breathable membrane sheet on the OSB board. Then I battened this for the cladding. The gap behind the cladding allowed it to breathe and any damp to escape. I then dug a hole for a soakaway. I put a gutter at the back of the roof, then a drain pipe from the guttering to the soakaway. I made sure there was a slight slope to allow the water to run freely from the guttering along the drain pipe to the soakaway. I used the 1x6 inch timber I'd left over from the roof joists to build the decking frame. I bought new boards online. I installed the wiring for the electrics. I traced this into the walls. I bought galvanised ducting to conceal the wiring to the lights. I put a 4-switch consumer unit on the inside of the man cave. I dug a trench to the back of the house to pick up the electrical supply from the main circuit board in the house, for the electrician to then connect this later. I fully insulated the walls inside with the insulation boards I had left over. I also used acoustic insulation for extra soundproofing. I used a vapour barrier, then battening to fix the plasterboard to. I used extra thick plasterboard in the main area. I put up a stud wall to separate the main area we will use as our office, hobby, studio area and the shed area where we will keep our garden tools and bikes. I insulated the partitioning wall as I won't heat the shed area. Now it is ready for painting. The electrician did the final fix by connecting electrical sockets and the light switches and then connecting this to the power supply in the house. I laid the floorboards and then sanded and sealed them. The shed section boards were second hand. The main area were new boards, but I had these milled in half. It was cheaper to do it this way and I got 1-length boards with no joins in. We then fitted the place out. I used an electrical traditional style column radiator. It is filled with ionised water. It has a thermostat on it to keep the chill off the room. The lights we got as a kit online. I made the table out of some of the roof joists that were left over. I really wanted wall-to-wall guitars, but my wife put all her wool here instead. I'm allowed a bass amp though. Job done.